Sherwood. Read, watch, listen.
Chapter 11. In the theater, great excitement reigned. Fire Eater, this was really his name, was very ugly, but he was far from being as bad as he looked. Proof of this is that, when he saw the poor marionette being brought in to him, struggling with fear and crying, "I don't want to die! I don't want to die!" he felt sorry for him and began first to waver and then to weaken. Finally, he could control himself no longer and gave a loud sneeze. At that sneeze, Harlequin, who until then had been as sad as a weeping willow, smiled happily and, leaning toward the marionette, whispered to him, "Good news, brother mine. Fire Eater has sneezed, and this is a sign that he feels sorry for you. You are saved." For be it known that, while other people, when sad and sorrowful, weep and wipe their eyes, Fire Eater, on the other hand, had the strange habit of sneezing each time he felt unhappy. The way was just as good as any other to show the kindness of his heart. After sneezing, Fire Eater, ugly as ever, cried to Pinocchio, "Stop crying! Your wails give me a funny feeling down here in my stomach, and..." Two loud sneezes finished his speech. "God bless you," said Pinocchio. "Thanks. Are your father and mother still living?" demanded Fire Eater. "My father, yes. My mother I have never known." "Your poor father would suffer terribly if I were to use you as firewood. Poor old man. I feel sorry for him." Three more sneezes sounded louder than ever. "God bless you," said Pinocchio. "Thanks. However, I ought to be sorry for myself, too, just now. My good dinner is spoiled. I have no more wood for the fire, and the lamb is only half cooked. Never mind. In your place, I'll burn some other marionette. Hey there, officers!" At the call, two wooden officers appeared, long and thin as a yard of rope, with queer hats on their heads and swords in their hands. Fire Eater yelled at them in a hoarse voice, "Take Harlequin, tie him, and throw him on the fire. I want my lamb well done." Think how poor Harlequin felt. He was so scared that his legs doubled up under him and he fell to the floor. Pinocchio, at that heartbreaking sight, threw himself at the feet of Fire Eater, and, weeping bitterly, asked in a pitiful voice which could scarcely be heard, "Have pity, I beg of you, signore." "There are no signori here." "Have pity, kind sir." "There are no sirs here." "Have pity, your excellency." On hearing himself addressed as Your Excellency, the director of the Marionette Theater sat up very straight in his chair, stroked his long beard, and, becoming suddenly kind and compassionate, smiled proudly as he said to Pinocchio, "Well, what do you want from me now, Marionette?" "I beg for mercy for my poor friend Harlequin, who has never done the least harm in his life." "There is no mercy here, Pinocchio. I have spared you. Harlequin must burn in your place. I am hungry, and my dinner must be cooked." "In that case," said Pinocchio proudly as he stood up and flung away his cap of dough, "in that case, my duty is clear. Come, officers, tie me up and throw me on those flames. No, it is not fair for poor Harlequin, the best friend that I have in the world, to die in my place." These brave words, said in a piercing voice, made all the other marionettes cry. Even the officers, who were made of wood also, cried like two babies. Fire Eater at first remained hard and cold as a piece of ice. But then, little by little, he softened and began to sneeze. And after 4 or 5 sneezes, he opened wide his arms and said to Pinocchio, "You are a brave boy. Come to my arms and kiss me." Pinocchio ran to him, and scurrying like a squirrel up the long black beard, he gave Fire Eater a loving kiss on the tip of his nose. "Has pardon been granted to me?" asked poor Harlequin with a voice that was hardly a breath. "Pardon is yours," answered Fire Eater, and sighing and wagging his head, he added, "Well, tonight I shall have to eat my lamb only half cooked. But beware the next time, marionettes." At the news that pardon had been given, the marionettes ran to the stage, and, turning on all the lights, they danced and sang till dawn. Chapter 12. The next day Fire Eater called Pinocchio aside and asked him, "What is your father's name?" "Geppetto." "And what is his trade?" "He's a wood carver." "Does he earn much?" "He earns so much that he never has a penny in his pockets. Just think that, in order to buy me an ABC book for school, he had to sell the only coat he owned, a coat so full of darns and patches that it was a pity." "Poor fellow. I feel sorry for him. Here, take these 5 gold pieces. Go, give them to him with my kindest regards." Pinocchio, as may easily be imagined, thanked him 1,000 times. He kissed each marionette in turn, even the officers, and beside himself with joy, set out on his homeward journey. He had gone barely half a mile when he met a lame fox and a blind cat walking together like 2 good friends. The lame fox leaned on the cat, and the blind cat let the fox lead him along. "Good morning, Pinocchio," said the fox, greeting him courteously. "How do you know my name?" asked the marionette. "I know your father well." "Where have you seen him?" "I saw him yesterday standing at the door of his house." "And what was he doing?" "He was in his shirt sleeves, trembling with cold." "Poor father! But after today, God willing, he will suffer no longer." "Why?" "Because I have become a rich man." "You, a rich man?" said the fox, and he began to laugh out loud. The cat was laughing also, but tried to hide it by stroking his long whiskers. "There is nothing to laugh at," cried Pinocchio angrily. "I'm very sorry to make your mouth water, but these, as you know, are 5 new gold pieces." And he pulled out the gold pieces which Fire Eater had given him. At the cheerful tinkle of the gold, the fox unconsciously held out his paw that was supposed to be lame, and the cat opened wide his 2 eyes till they looked like live coals, but he closed them again so quickly that Pinocchio did not notice. "And may I ask," inquired the fox, "what are you going to do with all that money?" "First of all," answered the marionette, "I want to buy a fine new coat for my father, a coat of gold and silver with diamond buttons. After that, I'll buy an ABC book for myself." "For yourself?" "For myself. I want to go to school and study hard." "Look at me," said the fox. "For the silly reason of wanting to study, I have lost a paw." "Look at me," said the cat. "For the same foolish reason I have lost the sight of both eyes." At that moment a blackbird, perched on the fence along the road, called out sharp and clear, "Pinocchio, do not listen to bad advice. If you do, you'll be sorry." Poor little blackbird! If he had only kept his words to himself! In the twinkling of an eyelid, the cat leaped on him and ate him, feathers and all. After eating the bird, he cleaned his whiskers, closed his eyes, and became blind once more. "Poor Blackbird," said Pinocchio to the cat. "Why did you kill him?"
"I killed him to teach him a lesson. He talks too much. Next time he will keep his words to himself."
By this time the three companions had walked a long distance. Suddenly the fox stopped in his tracks and, turning to the marionette, said to him, "Do you want to double your gold pieces?" "What do you mean?" "Do you want 100, 1,000, 2,000 gold pieces for your miserable 5? "Yes, but how?" "The way is very easy. Instead of returning home, come with us." "And where will you take me?" "To the city of Simple Simons." Pinocchio thought a while and then said firmly, "No, I don't want to go. Home is near, and I'm going where Father is waiting for me. How unhappy he must be that I have not yet returned. I have been a bad son, and the talking cricket was right when he said that a disobedient boy cannot be happy in this world. I have learned this at my own expense. Even last night in the theater, when Fire Eater... Brrr! The shivers run up and down my back at the mere thought of it." "Well, then," said the fox, "if you really want to go home, go ahead, but you'll be sorry."
"You'll be sorry," repeated the cat.
"Think well, Pinocchio. You are turning your back on Dame Fortune."
"On Dame Fortune," repeated the cat.
"Tomorrow your 5 gold pieces will be 2,000.
2,000, repeated the cat.
"But how can they possibly become so many?" asked Pinocchio wonderingly.
"I'll explain," said the fox. "You must know that just outside the city of Simple Simons, there is a blessed field called the Field of Wonders. In this field, you dig a hole, and in the hole you bury a gold piece. After covering up the hole with earth, you water it well, sprinkle a bit of salt on it, and go to bed. During the night, the gold piece sprouts, grows, blossoms, and next morning you find a beautiful tree that is loaded with gold pieces." "So that if I were to bury my 5 gold pieces," said Pinocchio with growing wonder, "next morning I should find how many?" "It is very simple to figure out," answered the fox. "Why, you can figure it on your fingers. Granted that each piece gives you 500, multiply 500 by 5. Next morning you will find 2,500 new sparkling gold pieces." "Fine, fine!" cried Pinocchio, dancing about with joy. "And as soon as I have them, I shall keep 2,000 for myself, and the other 500 I'll give to you two." "A gift for us?" cried the fox, pretending to be insulted. "Why, of course not." "Of course not," repeated the cat.
"We do not work for gain," answered the fox. "We work only to enrich others."
"To enrich others," repeated the cat.
"What good people," thought Pinocchio to himself, and forgetting his father, the new coat, the ABC book, and all his good resolutions, he said to the fox and to the cat, "Let us go. I am with you."
Chapter 13. Cat and Fox and Marionette walked and walked and walked. At last, toward evening, dead tired, they came to the Inn of the Red Lobster. "Let us stop here a while," said the Fox, "to eat a bite and rest for a few hours. At midnight we'll start out again, for at dawn tomorrow we must be at the Field of Wonders." They went into the inn, and all three sat down at the same table. However, not one of them was very hungry. The poor cat felt very weak, and he was able to eat only 35 mullets with tomato sauce and 4 portions of tripe with cheese. Moreover, as he was so in need of strength, he had to have 4 more helpings of butter and cheese. The Fox, after a great deal of coaxing, tried his best to eat a little. The doctor had put him on a diet, and he had to be satisfied with a small hare dressed with a dozen young and tender spring chickens. After the hare, he ordered some partridges, a few pheasants, a couple of rabbits, and a dozen frogs and lizards. That was all. He felt ill, he said, and could not eat another bite. Pinocchio ate least of all. He asked for a bite of bread and a few nuts, and then hardly touched them. The poor fellow, with his mind on the Field of Wonders, was suffering from a gold piece indigestion. Supper over, the Fox said to the innkeeper, "Give us 2 good rooms, one for Mr. Pinocchio and the other for me and my friend. Before starting out, we'll take a little nap. Remember to call us at midnight sharp, for we must continue on our journey." "Yes, sir," answered the innkeeper, winking in a knowing way at the Fox and the cat, as if to say, "I understand." As soon as Pinocchio was in bed, he fell fast asleep and began to dream. He dreamed he was in the middle of a field. The field was full of vines heavy with grapes. The grapes were no other than gold coins which tinkled merrily as they swayed in the wind. They seemed to say, "Let him who wants us take us." Just as Pinocchio stretched out his hand to take a handful of them, he was awakened by 3 loud knocks at the door. It was the innkeeper who had come to tell him that midnight had struck. "Are my friends ready?" the Marionette asked him. "Indeed, yes. They went 2 hours ago." "Why in such a hurry?" "Unfortunately, the cat received a telegram which said that his firstborn was suffering from chilblains and was on the point of death. He could not even wait to say goodbye to you." "Did they pay for the supper?" "How could they do such a thing? Being people of great refinement, they did not want to offend you so deeply as not to allow you the honor of paying the bill." "Too bad. That offense would have been more than pleasing to me," said Pinocchio, scratching his head. "Where did my good friends say they would wait for me?" he added. "At the Field of Wonders, at sunrise tomorrow morning." Pinocchio paid a gold piece for the 3 suppers and started on his way toward the field that was to make him a rich man. He walked on, not knowing where he was going, for it was dark, so dark that not a thing was visible. Round about him not a leaf stirred. A few bats skimmed his nose now and again and scared him half to death. Once or twice he shouted, "Who goes there?" And the faraway hills echoed back to him, "Who goes there? Who goes there? Who goes?" As he walked, Pinocchio noticed a tiny insect glimmering on the trunk of a tree, a small being that glowed with a pale, soft light. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am the ghost of the talking cricket," answered the little being in a faint voice that sounded as if it came from a faraway world. "What do you want?" asked the Marionette. "I want to give you a few words of good advice. Return home and give the 4 gold pieces you have left to your poor old father, who is weeping because he has not seen you for many a day." Tomorrow my father will be a rich man, for these 4 gold pieces will become 2,000. Don't listen to those who promise you wealth overnight, my boy. As a rule, they are either fools or swindlers. Listen to me and go home. But I want to go on. The hour is late. I want to go on. The night is very dark. I want to go on. The road is dangerous. I want to go on. Remember that boys who insist on having their own way sooner or later come to grief. The same nonsense. Goodbye, Cricket. Good night, Pinocchio, and may heaven preserve you from the assassins. There was silence for a minute, and the light of the talking cricket disappeared suddenly, just as if someone had snuffed it out. Once again, the road was plunged in darkness. Chapter 14. Dear, oh dear, when I come to think of it, said the Marionette to himself as he once more set out on his journey, we boys are really very unlucky. Everybody scolds us, everybody gives us advice, everybody warns us. If we were to allow it, everyone would try to be father and mother to us, everyone, even the talking cricket. Take me, for example. Just because I would not listen to that bothersome cricket, who knows how many misfortunes may be awaiting me? Assassins, indeed! At least I have never believed in them, nor ever will. To speak sensibly, I think assassins have been invented by fathers and mothers to frighten children who want to run away at night. And then, even if I were to meet them on the road, what matter? I'll just run up to them and say, "Well, signori, what do you want? Remember that you can't fool with me. Run along and mind your business." At such a speech, I can almost see those poor fellows running like the wind. But in case they don't run away, I can always run myself. Pinocchio was not given time to argue any longer, for he thought he heard a slight rustle among the leaves behind him. He turned to look, and behold, there in the darkness stood 2 big black shadows, wrapped from head to foot in black sacks. The 2 figures leaped toward him as softly as if they were ghosts. "Here they come," Pinocchio said to himself, and not knowing where to hide the gold pieces, he stuck all 4 of them under his tongue. He tried to run away, but hardly had he taken a step when he felt his arms grasped and heard 2 horrible, deep voices say to him, "Your money or your life." On account of the gold pieces in his mouth, Pinocchio could not say a word, so he tried with head and hands and body to show, as best as he could, that he was only a poor marionette without a penny in his pocket. "Come, come, less nonsense and out with your money!" cried the 2 thieves in threatening voices. Once more Pinocchio's head and hands said, "I haven't a penny." "Out with that money, or you're a dead man," said the taller of the 2 assassins. "Dead man," repeated the other. "And after having killed you, we will kill your father also." "Your father also." "No, no, no, not my father!" cried Pinocchio, wild with terror, but as he screamed, the gold pieces tinkled together in his mouth. "Ah, you rascal! So that's the game! You have the money hidden under your tongue. Out with it!" But Pinocchio was as stubborn as ever. "Are you deaf? Wait, young man, we'll get it from you in a twinkling." One of them grabbed the marionette by the nose and the other by the chin, and they pulled him unmercifully from side to side in order to make him open his mouth. All was of no use. The marionette's lips might have been nailed together. They would not open. In desperation, the smaller of the 2 assassins pulled out a long knife from his pocket and tried to pry Pinocchio's mouth open with it. Quick as a flash, the marionette sank his teeth deep into the assassin's hand, bit it off, and spat it out. Fancy his surprise when he saw that it was not a hand, but a cat's paw. Encouraged by this first victory, he freed himself from the claws of his assailers and, leaping over the bushes along the road, ran swiftly across the fields. His pursuers were after him at once, like two dogs chasing a hare. After running 7 miles or so, Pinocchio was well nigh exhausted. Seeing himself lost, he climbed up a giant pine tree and sat there to see what he could see. The assassins tried to climb also, but they slipped and fell. Far from giving up the chase, this only spurred them on. They gathered a bundle of wood, piled it up at the foot of the pine, and set fire to it. In a twinkling, the tree began to sputter and burn like a candle blown by the wind. Pinocchio saw the flames climb higher and higher. Not wishing to end his days as a roasted marionette, he jumped quickly to the ground and off he went, the assassins close to him as before. Dawn was breaking when, without any warning whatsoever, Pinocchio found his path barred by a deep pool full of water the color of muddy coffee. What was there to do? With a 1, 2, 3, he jumped clear across it. The assassins jumped also, but not having measured their distance well, splash! They fell right into the middle of the pool. Pinocchio, who heard the splash and felt it too, cried out laughing, but never stopping in his race, "A pleasant bath to you, signori!" He thought they must surely be drowned, and turned his head to see. But there were the two somber figures still following him, though their black sacks were drenched and dripping with water. Chapter 15. As he ran, the marionette felt more and more certain that he would have to give himself up into the hands of his pursuers. Suddenly, he saw a little cottage gleaming white as the snow among the trees of the forest. "If I have enough breath left with which to reach that little house, I may be saved," he said to himself. Not waiting another moment, he darted swiftly through the woods, the assassins still after him. After a hard race of almost an hour, tired and out of breath, Pinocchio finally reached the door of the cottage and knocked. No one answered. He knocked again, harder than before, for behind him he heard the steps and the labored breathing of his persecutors. The same silence followed. As knocking was of no use, Pinocchio, in despair, began to kick and bang against the door, as if he wanted to break it. At the noise, a window opened and a lovely maiden looked out. She had azure hair and a face white as wax. Her eyes were closed and her hands crossed on her breast. With a voice so weak that it could hardly be heard, she whispered, "No one lives in this house. Everyone is dead." "Won't you at least open the door for me?" cried Pinocchio in a beseeching voice. "I also am dead." "Dead? What are you doing at the window, then?" "I am waiting for the coffin to take me away." After these words, the little girl disappeared, and the window closed without a sound. "Oh, lovely maiden with azure hair!" cried Pinocchio. "Open, I beg of you! Take pity on a poor boy who is being chased by two assassins." He did not finish, for two powerful hands grasped him by the neck, and the same two horrible voices growled threateningly, "Now we have you!" The marionette, seeing death dancing before him, trembled so hard that the joints of his legs rattled, and the coins tinkled under his tongue. "Well," the assassins asked, "will you open your mouth now or not?" "Ah, you do not answer. Very well, this time you shall open it." Taking out two long, sharp knives, they struck two heavy blows on the marionette's back. Happily for him, Pinocchio was made of very hard wood, and the knives broke into 1,000 pieces. The assassins looked at each other in dismay, holding the handles of the knives in their hands. "I understand," said one of them to the other. There is nothing left to do now but to hang him." "To hang him," repeated the other. They tied Pinocchio's hands behind his shoulders and slipped the noose around his neck. Throwing the rope over the high limb of a giant oak tree, they pulled till the poor marionette hung far up in space. Satisfied with their work, they sat on the grass, waiting for Pinocchio to give his last gasp. But after 3 hours, the marionette's eyes were still open, his mouth still shut, and his legs kicked harder than ever. Tired of waiting, the assassins called to him mockingly, "Goodbye till tomorrow. When we return in the morning, we hope you'll be polite enough to let us find you dead and gone, and with your mouth wide open." With these words, they went. A few minutes went by, and then a wild wind started to blow. As it shrieked and moaned, the poor little sufferer was blown to and fro like the hammer of a bell. The rocking made him seasick, and the noose, becoming tighter and tighter, choked him. Little by little, a film covered his eyes. Death was creeping nearer and nearer, and the marionette still hoped for some good soul to come to his rescue, but no one appeared. As he was about to die, he thought of his poor old father, and hardly conscious of what he was saying, murmured to himself, "Oh, father, dear father, if you were only here." These were his last words. He closed his eyes, opened his mouth, stretched out his legs, and hung there as if he were dead. Chapter 16. If the poor marionette had dangled there much longer, all hope would have been lost. Luckily for him, the lovely maiden with azure hair once again looked out of her window. Filled with pity at the sight of the poor little fellow being knocked helplessly about by the wind, she clapped her hands sharply together 3 times. At the signal, a loud whir of wings in quick flight was heard, and a large falcon came and settled itself on the window ledge. "What do you command, my charming fairy?" asked the falcon, bending his beak in deep reverence. For it must be known that, after all, the lovely maiden with azure hair was none other than a very kind fairy who had lived for more than 1,000 years in the vicinity of the forest. "Do you see that marionette hanging from the limb of that giant oak tree?" "I see him." "Very well. Fly immediately to him. With your strong beak, break the knot which holds him tied. Take him down, and lay him softly on the grass at the foot of the oak." The falcon flew away, and after 2 minutes returned, saying, "I have done what you have commanded." "How did you find him? Alive or dead?" "At first glance I thought he was dead, but I found I was wrong, for as soon as I loosened the knot around his neck, he gave a long sigh and mumbled with a faint voice, 'Now I feel better.'" The fairy clapped her hands twice. A magnificent poodle appeared, walking on its hind legs just like a man. He was dressed in court livery. A tricorn trimmed with gold lace was set at a rakish angle over a wig of white curls that dropped down to his waist. He wore a jaunty coat of chocolate-colored velvet, with diamond buttons, and with 2 huge pockets which were always filled with bones, dropped there at dinner by his loving mistress. Breeches of crimson velvet, silk stockings, and low, silver-buckled slippers completed his costume. His tail was encased in a blue silk covering, which was to protect it from the rain. "Come, Madero," said the fairy to him. "Get my best coach ready, and set out toward the forest. On reaching the oak tree, you will find a poor, half-dead marionette stretched out on the grass. Lift him up tenderly, place him on the silken cushions of the coach, and bring him here to me." The poodle, to show that he understood, wagged his silk-covered tail 2 or 3 times, and set off at a quick pace. In a few minutes, a lovely little coach made of glass, with lining as soft as whipped cream and chocolate pudding, and stuffed with canary feathers, pulled out of the stable. It was drawn by 100 pairs of white mice, and the poodle sat on the coachman's seat and snapped his whip gaily in the air, as if he were a real coachman in a hurry to get to his destination. In a quarter of an hour, the coach was back. The fairy, who was waiting at the door of the house, lifted the poor little marionette in her arms, took him to a dainty room with mother-of-pearl walls, put him to bed, and sent immediately for the most famous doctors of the neighborhood to come to her. One after another the doctors came, a crow, an owl, and a talking cricket. "I should like to know, Signore," said the fairy, turning to the 3 doctors gathered about Pinocchio's bed, "I should like to know if this poor marionette is dead or alive." At this invitation the crow stepped out and felt Pinocchio's pulse, his nose, his little toe. Then he solemnly pronounced the following words: "To my mind, this marionette is dead and gone. But if by any evil chance he were not, then that would be a sure sign that he is still alive." "I am sorry," said the owl, "to have to contradict the crow, my famous friend and colleague. To my mind, this marionette is alive. But if by any evil chance he were not, then that would be a sure sign that he is wholly dead." "And do you hold any opinion?" the fairy asked the talking cricket. "I say that a wise doctor, when he does not know what he is talking about, should know enough to keep his mouth shut. However, that marionette is not a stranger to me. I have known him a long time." Pinocchio, who until then had been very quiet, shuddered so hard that the bed shook. "That marionette," continued the talking cricket, "is a rascal of the worst kind." Pinocchio opened his eyes and closed them again. "He is rude, lazy, a runaway." Pinocchio hid his face under the sheets. "That marionette is a disobedient son who is breaking his father's heart." Long shuddering sobs were heard, cries and deep sighs. Think how surprised everyone was when, on raising the sheets, they discovered Pinocchio half melted in tears. "When the dead weep, they are beginning to recover," said the crow solemnly. "I am sorry to contradict my famous friend and colleague," said the owl, "but as far as I'm concerned, I think that when the dead weep, it means they do not want to die." Chapter 17. As soon as the 3 doctors had left the room, the fairy went to Pinocchio's bed and, touching him on the forehead, noticed that he was burning with fever. She took a glass of water, put a white powder into it, and handing it to the marionette, said lovingly to him, "Drink this, and in a few days you'll be up and well." Pinocchio looked at the glass, made a wry face, and asked in a whining voice, "Is it sweet or bitter?" "It is bitter, but it is good for you." "If it is bitter, I don't want it." "Drink it." "I don't like anything bitter." "Drink it, and I'll give you a lump of sugar to take the bitter taste from your mouth." "Where's the sugar?" "Here it is," said the fairy, taking a lump from a golden sugar bowl. "I want the sugar first, then I'll drink the bitter water." "Do you promise?" "Yes." The fairy gave him the sugar, and Pinocchio, after chewing and swallowing it in a twinkling, said, smacking his lips, "If only sugar were medicine, I should take it every day." "Now keep your promise and drink these few drops of water. They'll be good for you." Pinocchio took the glass in both hands and stuck his nose into it. He lifted it to his mouth and once more stuck his nose into it. "It is too bitter, much too bitter. I can't drink it." "How do you know when you haven't even tasted it?" "I can imagine it. I smell it. I want another lump of sugar, then I'll drink it." The fairy, with the patience of a good mother, gave him more sugar and again handed him the glass. "I can't drink it like that," the marionette said, making more wry faces. "Why?" "Because that feather pillow on my feet bothers me." The fairy took away the pillow. "It's no use. I can't drink it even now." "What's the matter now?" "I don't like the way that door looks. It's half open." The fairy closed the door. "I won't drink it!" cried Pinocchio, bursting out crying. "I won't drink this awful water. I won't! I won't! No, 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 no!" "My boy, you'll be sorry." "I don't care." "You are very sick." "I don't care." "In a few hours, the fever will take you far away to another world." "I don't care." "Aren't you afraid of death?" "Not a bit. I'd rather die than drink that awful medicine." At that moment the door of the room flew open and in came 4 rabbits as black as ink, carrying a small black coffin on their shoulders. "What do you want from me?" asked Pinocchio.
"We have come for you," said the largest rabbit.
"For me? But I'm not dead yet."
"No, not dead yet, but you will be in a few moments, since you have refused to take the medicine which would have made you well."
"Oh, fairy, my fairy," the marionette cried out. "Give me that glass, quick, please. I don't want to die. No, no, not yet, not yet." And holding the glass with his 2 hands, he swallowed the medicine at one gulp.
"Well," said the 4 rabbits, "this time we have made the trip for nothing."
And turning on their heels, they marched solemnly out of the room, carrying their little black coffin and muttering and grumbling between their teeth. In a twinkling, Pinocchio felt fine. With one leap, he was out of bed and into his clothes. The fairy, seeing him run and jump around the room, gay as a bird on wings, said to him, "My medicine was good for you after all, wasn't it?" "Good indeed. It has given me new life." "Why, then, did I have to beg you so hard to make you drink it?" "I'm a boy, you see, and all boys hate medicine more than they do sickness." "What a shame! Boys ought to know, after all, that medicine, taken in time, can save them from much pain, and even from death." "Next time I won't have to be begged so hard. I'll remember those black rabbits with the black coffin on their shoulders, and I'll take the glass and, poof, down it will go." "Come here now, and tell me how it came about that you found yourselves in the hands of the assassins." "It happened that Fire Eater gave me 5 gold pieces to give to my father, but on the way I met a fox and a cat, who asked me, 'Do you want the 5 pieces to become 2,000? And I said, 'Yes.' And they said, 'Come with us to the Field of Wonders.' And I said, 'Let's go.' Then they said, 'Let us stop at the Inn of the Red Lobster for dinner, and after midnight we'll set out again.' We ate and went to sleep. When I awoke, they were gone, and I started out in the darkness all alone. On the road I met 2 assassins dressed in black coal sacks, who said to me, 'Your money or your life.' And I said, 'I haven't any money,' for, you see, I had put the money under my tongue. One of them tried to put his hand in my mouth, and I bit it off and spat it out, but it wasn't a hand, it was a cat's paw. And they ran after me, and I ran and ran, till at last they caught me and tied my neck with a rope and hanged me to a tree, saying, 'Tomorrow we'll come back for you, and you'll be dead, and your mouth will be open, and then we'll take the gold pieces that you have hidden under your tongue." "Where are the gold pieces now?" the fairy asked. "I lost them," answered Pinocchio, but he told a lie, for he had them in his pocket. As he spoke, his nose, long though it was, became at least 2 inches longer. "And where did you lose them?" "In the wood nearby." At this second lie, his nose grew a few more inches. "If you lost them in the nearby wood," said the fairy, "we'll look for them and find them, for everything that is lost there is always found." "Ah, now I remember," replied the marionette, becoming more and more confused. "I did not lose the gold pieces, but I swallowed them when I drank the medicine." At this third lie, his nose became longer than ever, so long that he could not even turn around. If he turned to the right, he knocked it against the bed or into the window panes. If he turned to the left, he struck the walls or the door. If he raised it a bit, he almost put the fairy's eyes out. The fairy sat looking at him and laughing. "Why do you laugh?" the marionette asked her, worried now at the sight of his growing nose. "I am laughing at your lies." "How do you know I'm lying?" "Lies, my boy, are known in a moment. There are 2 kinds of lies, lies with short legs and lies with long noses. Yours, just now, happen to have long noses." Pinocchio, not knowing where to hide his shame, tried to escape from the room, but his nose had become so long that he could not get it out of the door.
Thanks for watching Sherwood. Scan the QR code to download our free app. Subscribe for unlimited access to books, audiobooks, podcasts, movies, and shows. See you next time.